Friends and weaver, another beautiful story. The name of the story is Catherine's Fate. So the story starts like this. There once lived a very rich and generous merchant who had a gorgeous palace. The pride of his life was his daughter. So the beautiful creature called Catherine. Catherine was tall and slim, with black hair and large eyes. Her hands and feet were small and delicate, her skin as soft as the petals of rose. In the palace there were thrones of gold, chairs of silver set with precious turquoises pictures, water jugs set with diamonds. All around her was luxury and beauty. Peacocks strolled in the garden. Flowers bloomed in pots hanging from trees. All was the best that money could buy. One day when Catherine was walking in the garden, dressed in long silken robes, swin with the finest pearls and a cap with the trestles of pearls, a very elegant-looking lady appeared before her. There was an extraordinary look about this lady. Her eyes were very penetrating and dark. Her clothes did not seem to be anything but luminous reproach. Catherine, my dear child, said the lady, what would you rather have? Would you like to enjoy your life in your youth? Or would you like to enjoy it in your old age? Or you have only these two choices. Catherine thought for a moment. And then she said, if I have my enjoyment now, I will suffer for it in my last years. And the tall lady said, yes. But how do you know? Asked the Catherine, still pondering the question. I am your fate, answered the apparition. Oh, that I will have my good fortune in my old age, said Catherine. Very well, so be it, said her fate and vanished. Catherine thought nothing of this encounter, returning to the house to change her clothes for something even finer. But a few days later, terrible things began to happen. There was a great storm at sea. Catherine's father had expected his ships to return from a foreign country loaded with rich cargoes, and they, by the tempest to the bottom of the sea, his warehouse were gutted by a mysterious fire. So when he decided to refit new ships, there was nothing to put in them. He hired a ship to a duke who wanted to go to war with another prince. And all the ships were sunk in an engagement with pirates. The duke's men were put to the sword, and he too was penniless. Thieves broke in and stole all Catherine's jewels. Her clothes had to sold to keep them in food and little. All lost, wretched and ill. Catherine's father died, leaving her alone in the world, penniless in a very simple garments. Catherine decided to leave this unlucky city and find some work, if possible, in another place. So she farewelled to the city of her birth and trudged off. She eventually reached a noble city far from her own country and was standing in the street, wondering which way to go. She only had a little money given to her by an old nurse and was wondering where she could buy a piece of bread. A lady of quality looking out her window saw her and called out, who are you, my dear? Where do you come from? You are not from this part of the land. Lady, I am alone in this world, as my father, who was once a rich merchant, has died. And I'm looking for someone to buy a piece of bread, she said. Come into my house. I need a servant. And you will do very well, said the noblewoman. And Catherine went gratefully inside the big house. The lady became very fond of Catherine and trusted her with all things she possessed. One day the mistress said to her, I have to go out for a little while. Lock the door behind me and let no one either in or until I will return. So Catherine locked the door and sat down by the fire. No sooner had the noble woman gone than the door flew open and her fate entered. Her luck entered. So here you are, Catherine, cried her fate harshly. You have found yourself a very nice place here, haven't you? You can't escape me like that, you know. She began to throw the mistress' valuable all over the floor, breaking glass and china and tearing priceless to pieces. Oh no, cried Catherine. I shall get into the most dreadful trouble. The lady trusts me. Oh, does she? Sneered her fate well. Explain this to her when she came back. Then she ripped the long silken curtain to tatters. Catherine put her hands to her face and ran from the house, never looking back in case her fate was following. No sooner had she gone than her fate put everything back exactly as if he had been before and disappeared. Then the lady came back. House was perfectly tidy, but Catherine was gone. The mistress called and called. But of course the poor girl did not hear, for she was far away. The lady looked everywhere and thought perhaps, but nothing was missing. She could not understand what could have happened. The girl had seemed to be perfectly reliable. No, poor Catherine ran on until she reached another city, and then, when looking for somewhere to buy a piece of bread, she was noticed by another lady standing at her window. The lady opened the window and said to her, "Where are you from? And what are you doing in this place, when so obviously you seem to be lost? I'm a poor girl from far away, and I'm looking for something to eat, as I'm very hungry," said Catherine. "Well, come into my house," said the lady. "I'll feed you and clothe you, and you may have position in hold." So Catherine went in. But the very same thing happened as before. No sooner was she settled in and trusted with all his valuable than her fate appeared and created chaos in a few seconds. "Do you think that there was anywhere in this world I would not be able to find you?" cried her fate harshly, sweeping a line of priceless scent bottles to the ground and smashing them to the floor. Catherine put her hands to her face and ran. So it went on for the space of 7 years. And each time Catherine was taken on by some nice lady, the appearance of her fate caused her to travel on and on, endlessly, and it seemed to her, but she never escaped for long. But at this Catherine, her fate always restored everything to its former state the minute Catherine had disappeared. Now 7 years passed in this manner, and when Catherine was working for a very noble lady with a very kind heart, it was almost as if fate had forgotten her. Day after day, Catherine looked after the house, and things were always right for her. The tension was very great, though. For every hour she expected the door to fly open and her fate to appear each day. She had to go up to the mountain with a basket of the finest bread and just for her. A tall, dignified personage took the bread from her graceful each day, and after bowing disappeared into a cave. One day her mistress told her, "I always have to appropriate my fate in this way. If that fresh bread and cheese were not sent to her, I shudder to think what she might cause to happen to me." At this, Catherine began to weep, unable to hide her grief, for she had suffered so much in the last 7 years that she could no longer hide her sadness. "My dear child, what is the matter with you? Tell me at once," cried the kind-hearted mistress, placing her hand on Catherine's shoulder. So Catherine told her the story of her fate's cruelty and continued, "I do not think that I can stand any more of this anguish. expecting her to appear any moment and to tear everything to pieces as she was. In fact, I will go away from here soon, that I do not bring my fair destruction upon this house. Now let me think of a plan, said the noblewoman, striking her forehead. Yes, I have it. When you go up the mountain with my fate bread, tell her your story and appeal to her to have a word with your fate. So she leaves off tormenting you like this. I'm sure my fate, who is kind, will help. So the next day, when Catherine went up to the mountain with the bread of the mistress, she asked her to intercede with her own fate. Well, your fate is asleep under 7 quilts just now, said the lady's fate. But when you come tomorrow, she might be awake, and I will take you to her. Catherine went away full of hope and slept that night quite peacefully. When she took the bread up the mountain next morning, her mistress' fate took her to her own fate, who lay in a large bed covered to the eyes with 7 feather quilts. Now, sister, here is Catherine, said the fate of the noble woman. Leave off tormenting her, so I beg you to give her a little rest now. Her fate said nothing but, here is a skein of silk. Look after it carefully. It will be of a great use to you. Now leave me to rest. And she pulled the quilts over her head. Puzzled by this, Catherine went home. Her mistress was all agog to know what had happened, but could not make head nor tail of story. Catherine told her, the silk is worth scarcely anything, she said, but you had better keep it. It might be of some use as your fate, said the king of that country, who was young and extremely handsome, was to marry, and there was much consternation when it was discovered that no silk of the right color to sew the king's wedding robe was to be found in the entire kingdom. Issue a proclamation, said the king. I must have my robes done in time. Send to the 4 countries bordering my land. Send to every quarter of my dominion. Whoever silk of this color must bring it to the court. I shall reward the honor of the silk generously. The noble woman heard the proclamation and came to tell Catherine, Catherine, my child, put up this dress and take your skein to the court. It is exactly the color the king's tailor is looking for, she cried excitedly. You will be rewarded most generously, I am sure. When the Catherine appeared at the court before the young king found her so beautiful to look upon that he could not take his eyes off her face. Your Majesty, said she, will this silk be suitable for your wedding robe? You shall be paid in pure gold for it. Then said the king, bring the scales and we will weigh the skin. Whatever it weighs, you shall have the equivalent in the finest gold of my realm. They brought the scales, but no matter how much gold was put upon the scale, the skein was always heavier. Then the king had larger scale brought and threw all his treasure onto the scales, and still the scale weighed more. Then in extreme exasperation, the king took the crown off his head and put it on the scales. At that very second, the scale balanced and the king laughed. Where did you get this silk, my dear? He asked Catherine. At that very second, the scale balanced. From my mistress, said the Catherine, and the king shouted, impossible. What sort of lady is your mistress that she has magic silk like this? Then the king all that happened to her king and took her hand in his. I will marry you instead of the girl to whom I have been betrothed, he said. And so it happened afterwards. Catherine, who had suffered so much in her youth, lived to be a very old woman and was happy until the moment of her death as queen of that far country. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of the Catherine's fate. I hope you would enjoy the story, a very interesting story perhaps. Thank you very much.